The United Nations usually travels throughout the third world, investigating all sorts of stuff that would make you sad. But one time, 10 years ago, somebody tipped the UN off, and they were like, go check out rural Alabama if you want to see some basic human rights violations. So they did. They came here and they were like, wait, what? These are usually things we see in the world's least developed countries. The report added, I've never seen anything like this in the developed world. Meaning, this place is damn poor. It was now well past the first half of my tour of the Deep South. The trip began in New Orleans, where I talked to people who were worried about what their neighborhoods are going to look like down the road. I went to bad parts of Arkansas, and that was sobering. But it wasn't until I got to rural Mississippi and Alabama that things got really real. I spent 2 days driving around rural Alabama, and I went down roads that were so tucked away that Google Maps hadn't even been down there yet. I had no idea where I was going. I just drove around and looked at everything. And just wow, everyone. This is Alabama's Black Belt.
My report demonstrates that growing inequality and widespread poverty, which afflicts almost one child out of every 5, has deeply negative implications for the enjoyment of civil and political rights.
That was in 2017. And that isn't another country the UN guy's talking about. It was Alabama. And things really haven't changed here much since then. So where in the Alabama are we anyways? Well, we're here in sort of central-ish Alabama, in a region that's been called the Black Belt. Just about the whole region's farmland and small towns that have seen far better days. There's really no reason to come down here anymore if you don't have any business in town. And today, there's very little business to be had. The Black Belt isn't named that because of the race of the people who live here. Although it is 80% African American. It's called the Black Belt because of the rich soil. The dirt here is so good that this was pretty much the best producing region for cotton in the 1800s. There were cotton plantations with slaves, just like this one, all over the area. And cotton was a big deal back then, let me tell you that. It was such a big deal that 500,000 people died to protect it. And as we know, the whole cotton thing peaked. Abraham Lincoln said, slavery's illegal, and the farmers' profits went kaput. This whole area that had been once home to huge successful farms went into hard decline during and after the Civil War. Anyways, a lot of the black folks left this area when cotton dried up and they went north for good jobs. Most never came back, and now this part of Alabama is some of the most rural in the state. It's also the poorest part of the state. And saying somewhere's the poorest place in Alabama is saying a lot. Alabama's already the 5th poorest state in the country. 17% of the state lives in poverty, but in places like this, it's closer to 25 or 30%. I'd guess that a lot of the families on this street probably make $30K a year at best. It's pretty much like this everywhere you go down here. All of Alabama's poorest counties are along this region. I crisscrossed a lot of the Black Belt for 2 days, and I just stopped and looked at everything. The housing here is way outdated and falling down all over the place. A lot of the homes don't have sewage systems. I bet a lot of these people don't even have internet. Now, I mentioned that I went down some rural Alabama roads that haven't really been documented before. There's little roads all over the place that you see them. You're driving down the highway and they're not really marked or anything. Sometimes you can't even tell if it's a road or a driveway or what. Sometimes I would go down those and see what I would see. Here's an example of one of the roads we went down. We were just driving around the countryside and saw this road, and it wasn't marked, and we didn't know what was back there. It really wasn't what I expected. It's actually pretty quiet and peaceful back here. Kind of like a little Smurf village with the little houses and trailers and shacks everywhere. It's pretty basic, but it wasn't a disaster or anything. I just saw a bunch of people who want to be left alone. Sounds good to me. You do your thing back here, fella. But it's pretty random down here in this part of the state. The area isn't completely wrecked or anything. Far from it. I mean, just a half mile down the road, and there's lots of nice homes. Some streets are clean and neat and actually kind of pleasant. I don't know why these people have it better than a lot of the other people in the area, but they just do. I mean, all over the place you see really nice homes with lots of land. They've been able to thrive here. Good for them. Of course, the population in this region is going down every year. There's just nothing for people to do here who didn't go to college, except maybe work at gas stations and Chick-fil-A. Good luck finding a hospital. Half the counties here don't even have any hospitals. But that's how it is in America these days. The hospitals can't stay open because people down here can't afford to pay their bills. Our healthcare system here is so messed up, people risk their damn lives going down to Mexico for organ transplants. In case you're wondering, this is all Democrat voters where we are. Not to get political and all, but it's interesting that if you look at the voting patterns in Alabama, this whole region's blue. So you could call this the Blue Belt, too.
Turn right onto Church Street.
A lot of the businesses have closed down in this region. There's entire malls that are just empty. Sometimes they can find new tenants for these buildings, but at this point, I think they're just going to sit there and decay until somebody can get around to tearing them down. And no, you can't put the homeless in this type of stuff. I bet they'd burn it down in a day. You could do a whole video on how bad the schools are in rural Alabama. Sometimes they have to close down too, because there just aren't enough kids to keep them open. There's just no money. There's no tax base. I noticed Alabama doesn't have a lottery. That would get some dollars rolling in. They should do that. But do you know any teachers who would want to come down here and begin their careers making lousy salaries? I don't. Now, I heard about a woman named Catherine Flowers. She's been cited online as being a very vocal activist for the Black Belt. She's been trying to draw attention to the troubles of this area. I reached out to her, but her PR person said she's too busy to talk to me. So back to the UN thing. Okay, so the UN, they put this report out about this part of Alabama. They said, looks to us that Alabama has the worst poverty in the Western world. Not just the US, the developed world people. And this was in 2017. This wasn't in the olden days. The report talked about disease, stuff you find in third world countries, open sewage systems, and just really severe poverty. So basically, they called this part of Alabama one big human rights violation. Well, Nikki Haley, our then U.S. ambassador to the UN, called the report misleading and biased. She was like, Why is the UN examining poverty in the wealthiest place in the world? She called the UN Council a cesspool. And then the UN guy was like, let's talk about rural Alabama. Look in your own backyard if you want to see third world, lady.
Oh, snap! And why is America first so controversial anyways?
Karen, I don't know. You think we'd spend all of our money in our own states instead of trying to fix the rest of the world, but that's not what we do anymore.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Why is this so bad?
It's not just the teeny little places in the middle of nowhere that are struggling. This is Montgomery, Alabama. It's the biggest city in the state. There's about 200,000 people here now. Of course, Montgomery has a lot of big city things and opportunities, but this little neighborhood is only a mile or two from downtown. They're clearly struggling to make ends meet. By the way, these houses are worth about $100K at this point. This is Greenville. It's a lot smaller. I think there's only 7,000 or 8,000 people here now. But it's big for rural Alabama Black Belt. Greenville had some of the most abandoned I saw. I mean, entire neighborhoods here were on their way to no man's land. Everyone's just leaving. Why stick around anymore if you don't have family in town? They do have banks. I mean, they're not completely backwards in the rural towns. There's some people here with a lot of money. There's just a big gap between the rich and poor. This is Hayneville, Alabama. Population 778 and going down by the month. If you want an example of how the history still lingers here, check this out. Right here in the town square is a memorial where they used to hang black people. Right in the middle of town, right here. It was in Hayneville that I met these guys. They were standing around in the middle of the square, kind of drinking a bit and cutting up. I asked them about the area, and they were very positive. They sort of answered my question about why people still stick it out in rural Alabama towns like this.
Not here.
The what?
There's not a whole lot of killing right here.
It's safe.
It's safe right here. Yeah. So we better come on here.
Now, somebody want to come down here and try something, they get 100 years with the quickness. They'll never get out.
But it's good though. It's real good.
What kind of values do people here have?
Huh?
Values, like what kind of stuff do people believe in? What do they care about the most?
Yeah, they value that lion skin.
Well,
You know, gator skin, bear skin.
They do all
Them the
that.
high value.
What you think? What can you say on that?
They value livestock. Longhorn cow, you know. Angus beef.
You got a lot of stuff down here like that.
Yeah.
Got a lot of stuff down like that. But
Yeah, what's it like here?
it's good. It's real good.
Laid back country
Laid
style,
back,
you know.
yeah. It's
They
laid
go
back.
fishing, go hunting, you know.
Yeah.
Possibility to see a deer in your front yard, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
it's
Get a
good.
good game.
You know, I heard the same thing when I was in the poorest parts of Mississippi. Folks I stopped over there were kind of like the same thing. We like it here. It's quiet and safe. It's cheap. I think that says a lot about how they think about their home and what we think about their home. I mean, who am I to assume? I'm just a guy looking at statistics and driving around observing. I've never lived here. I mean, it sure is cheap. I'll give them that. You can easily get a house for 30 grand in this part of the state, and for a little more, you'll get a bunch of land. And I know a lot of you are saying, this looks a hell of a lot better than Philadelphia. I'd rather be here than Oakland. I agree. Guess if you had some good friends and family and church around, it wouldn't be so bad. It doesn't cost nothing to smile, right? Well, it's pretty clear. A lot of people love this. Probably more than we might think. But all that aside, there are some major problems. So how do you fix all this? Well, it's beyond political. There's money coming in here, but the black folks feel that they're being neglected so the white folks can have their basic needs met. So it's a racial thing down here. The person in charge, her name's Kay Ivey, she just approved $5 million more to try to promote job growth in this area. I have no idea where that money will be used or if it'll even put a dent in this problem, but I suppose anything helps. I bet if they increase the minimum wage here, that would help some of these people out. And there's jobs here. I mean, it's not a complete dead zone. There's a lot of blue-collar jobs in the region. I passed by a little peanut shelling plant in one of the little towns I stopped in. Doesn't sound like glamorous work, but it's work. I don't think you and I would want to do that, though, would we? I think the bigger problem isn't jobs, but who can actually work? A lot of these people don't have reliable cars or childcare or decent credit. A lot of them haven't even finished high school. So the one thing that they have been able to do here is expand food stamps. But these people can't live on food stamps forever. You can't rent a house on food stamps. Alabama gets a lot of money from the feds to help fix stuff like this. But a lot of that's sent off to new construction. To fix all this old stuff, they'd have to raise taxes even higher. And these people can't afford that. So stuff like this just rots away. The Fed had created opportunity zones a few years ago. They give tax relief and try to incentivize companies to come down here and open up shop. But again, I just don't think there's enough people to work. Another idea they had was to try to bring in successful people and maybe they'll bring their families in. Like, move here and we'll forgive your student loans. That's been hard to get going. I mean, reliable internet's been a headache here. That's like the first thing those people would want. And half the people down here don't have broadband internet at all. They don't have slow internet. Just, they don't have internet. Like, they're on dial-up. I don't know who you blame for all of this. The leaders who let it get this way, or the people who live here that couldn't fix it themselves. Maybe both. Or maybe they just don't care. It's just how they want to be. And all these places were built by our forefathers who named these towns and took pride in them. And now the kids have the house and the picket fences are gone and the grass isn't being mowed. But it's their house now. They can do with it what they want. But no matter what these places look like anymore, the population loss is a big deal for Alabama. If they keep losing people in this part of Alabama, they're going to lose votes in Washington, which means the issues we're seeing right now might get worse. This is happening all over the country right now. Small towns and regions like this are just slowly rotting away. Some people say this region's 20 years behind the times. You could say maybe they're 20 years ahead. Did you hear about the UN report that came out in 2017? And that's what drew my attention to the Black Belt story.
No, but coming from the UN, I'm really not quite surprised. The UN tends to be a bit of a malicious institution, and they have an agenda that is a growing agenda, unfortunately, and we see it in a lot of different ways today in our culture, where people are looking to government to fix every ill in their life. And that's a fiction. Governments can't eliminate poverty, and they can't eliminate every ill that humankind faces. Quite simply, it's just not possible. We live in a finite world. And now, while they can't eliminate it, they can certainly extend it and exacerbate it. That they do really well. In terms of my studies over the years, I can go back and look at policy after policy where they've implemented it under the supposed notion that if we do this new rule or this new law, we will eliminate that problem. And what will happen is they'll do that and they'll create 3 or 4 additional problems and almost have no impact on the one they were identified originally. And then instead of going, wow, that was a mistake, maybe we need to get rid of that, that's not what they do. What they'll do is, well, we need to address all these new problems as well and come up with new laws to fix all
their problems they created.
Right, all the problems that we've created. And it doesn't work. You want to go. So it's this sort of utopian mindset that a lot of the political types have in mind, that we can legislate our way to prosperity. And when you think about it, nobody's ever gotten to prosperity that way.
I would say the Black Belt is a less poor, behind the times version of the Mississippi Delta, where you just have places that have been forgotten about, mostly because of the loss of agriculture and jobs, and people are just leaving the area. There's really no reason for a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are still living there that have had family that have grown that, but I mean, there's not a lot of reasons to really move there unless you want to just buy some land, I guess.
Yeah. Well, some of this dates back, to the 1930s with the New Deal programs and the creation of the Department of Agriculture. All the acreage allotments and the regs and the rules, they make it almost impossible to do small acreage farming at all. A lot of acreage has just been taken completely out of production altogether. And so anybody who was making a living and perhaps could still make a living in agriculture, if you're on the lower end of the stick, you just can't do it. It's just not there anymore.
So if we can't spend our way out of this rural poverty that we see in Alabama, what can we do? You were like, get out of the way and let them figure it out, and they'll figure it out if they're going to figure it out. So
yeah, I think so. People are a lot smarter, I think, than we give people credit for. I mean, everyone responds to economic incentives, and a lot of times, just like I said earlier, one of the big problems in like Fairfield is that you have so many people on welfare, and you got to meet the conditions to be on welfare. And a lot of those conditions has led to the breakup of families in that community, but it's also happening in poor, it's not just ethnicity, this is happening in poor white communities as well, that once you try to meet those conditions, marriage doesn't mean anything anymore. Being a stand-up guy and having your family and taking care of your family. Well, if you can get it from the government, why would you do it? I mean, it frees up a lot of time. You can do a lot of other things. And so people are making what seem to be just economic decisions, what's best at the moment, but not really thinking about the long-term future, if you will. And it really shows later, like with the children, with the offspring, because then they end up being raised in homes where education's not really promoted. There are no books available. But that didn't used to be the case.
So can we, if we just eliminate or dial down the welfare to try to transition people back to reality again?
I think that would go a long way towards, then people will begin to look, right? I mean, you're not going to get your way out of there until you start looking.
But then people say, well, there's nowhere for me to work. There's no jobs.
Well, all right, then you begin to be creative, right? And in other words, there are all these kinds of regulations that are preventing people from accomplishing their ends.
So the conservative viewpoint would be this is all overregulated and we created this own problem. Get out of the way and let them figure it out. The liberal side would be keep feeding them the payments and the money because they're not capable of doing anything for themselves.
Right. And there's a lot of that. And it's sort of a...
Did I oversimplify that? Or
no, I think you're right. It's the issue of dependency. When we think about poverty and I want to think about helping someone, why do I want to do it? Do I want to do it so they become dependent upon me and I become, in essence, their God? Or am I doing it because I really do care for that person? I'd like to see them have a better life. And I know that the only way they're going to have that better life is eventually they're on their own 2 feet, right?
It's a Republican state. Like your state is like one of the hardest read of all states. I know that region's very Democratic.
But politics being politics, I think the real issue, if I look at the Republican and the Democrat Party, I don't see, as far as a worldview mindset, just a whole lot of difference between the two. What I see is they differ in degree. That's a major problem with what has been sold to the American public, because there are a lot of people in our American public that kind of think this can work. They view government as if almost it's a Santa Claus or the tooth fairy. Whatever you want, we've got it for you.
So do you think they're going to figure this out in the Black Belt of Alabama? Do you think they'll figure it out? Do you think maybe the people that live there, maybe they just don't care? They're poor. It's simple life, and they just, leave us alone. We don't care what we are ranked. What you think?
I would think it probably varies. Different people will look at the situation differently. Some, if there are no opportunities, some will just leave and go somewhere where there are opportunities, and then
that's what's happening now. I mean, they're losing. Yeah. There's the people that they're dying, or they're like, okay, I'm out of here. A lot of people I talk to driving around some of the rural Mississippi and Alabama, we like it here. It's safe. It's clean. We don't have to deal with all the BS from the big cities, which I am a huge fan of, and I agree with them.
Right.
And here comes the YouTuber guy driving around filming rural poverty. And they're like, what's wrong with it? Like, what are you looking at? Like, we're just poor. Like, what
and maybe, and there's, if that's people can choose that, right? I mean, if that's your preference, cost of living could be really quite low, and you might enjoy your life like that much more than some other way. And so like I said, I think there's a
question that a lot of people will say is like, we've got areas that look like they've been bombed out, where you've got downtowns that are all abandoned, malls are closed, neighborhoods that are falling down, streets that are terrible shape, infrastructure, no internet, sewage. And then we're giving, it's this thing that's going on the internet right now, for example, like Ukraine, whatever $1 billion, or we're spending whatever $1 billion overseas. Why don't we spend that on our own homes and make our own people live a secure life instead of, is there an argument to that, or is that just?
Well, yeah, I think there is. The U.S. has been involved in promoting this welfare warfare state for quite some time. And, it dates back, over 100 years now. Their idea is socialistic at its core. that if we can force everybody into our centrally planned machine, then we'll take care of all problems. And what we've got to do is root out of each individual their self-interest. And that's a tougher one for most people to handle. And the more I develop a dependency mindset, the less I'm going to accept responsibility for myself
So
and
do you
expect
think
somebody else
Yeah,
to do so.
are we throwing money away that could be used here internally?
Yeah, I mean, if the only answer really is restrictions on government, cutting government down to size. But I'm not sure it's going to happen.
Do you think we're witnessing an the fall of an empire? A lot of people comment on just about every video I do when I go in and show people, here's what rural this or terrible this or whatever. I get a ton of comments from people that are like, we're about to collapse. Every empire fails. This is the beginning. You're documenting the fall of the American empire. Do you think that's true?
It takes a very long time, typically, for a nation to collapse. And a lot of it depends upon how wealthy you were at the start of your fall.
So, but I mean, I guess, do you feel like we're headed for the decline? Do you think?
Yeah, we are. But and the issue this is, what is the degree of freedom that's still available? I mean, can people still be entrepreneurial in America today? And I would say, yeah.
So like our decline is happening, but the extent of it is to be determined, is what you think.
Right. And now always in the process, I think you're identifying something that's really important. It's the poorest of the poor who suffer the most the first. And then more and more people get drugged down with them, people at the margin. So if you're lower middle class, the possibilities right now, because of inflation, that you would be sucked down into lower class, that can happen.
It's happening.
And it's happening a lot to a lot of people right now. If it does happen, that it comes quicker than I can imagine. I wouldn't think it'd be quick. But if it comes quicker than I can imagine, people like my sister in the catbird seat, because they can grow their own food. She's got deer out on those 300 acres. I mean, they can get a generator out there and live pretty well. The best thing you can do is isolate yourself from the government, right? In other words, the last thing you want to do is to become a dependent. Because if you're a dependent, then, they got you. But if you're not a dependent, then you got them. Isolate yourself. And, I think that's, what some people are beginning to think, hey, I got this. That's what I need to do.
Yeah, and that's the reason some of these people stick around these places. They're just like, hey, I'm fine. Get out of here, YouTuber, nosy guy with the camera. Just pointing your camera at falling down stuff.
Yeah, well.
Go back to LA and shoot the homeless crap. Are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. And I can also help you find your new house, too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home, too. That's right. I know awesome, reliable agents all over the country, and I'd love to connect you to somebody who can help you search for that perfect home. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. you should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.